The system is designed to keep Gen Z poor. Right now, we, Gen Z, are no different than the farm animals that are grown for their meat to be harvested. Essentially, the cow that gets raised, and its only purpose was to be born so that it can be raised into meat for humans, for us. This is literally what we as a generation are doing right now. We are being raised to work and to fund the previous generations that came before us. They've set up the system in such a way that no matter how hard we work, and we are actually the most hardworking generation out of the current generations that are alive, and we somehow don't actually get any richer from it. Isn't that crazy? That no matter how many hours we're putting in, we can work 70, 80 hours a week, and we're still gonna end up poor. Because everything we do is designed to be harder, because the gap between the upper class or the rich and the poor is growing so large that it basically makes it impossible to stop being poor. There is such a thing called poverty tax. Essentially what that means is being poor actually costs more money than being rich, and being rich actually only makes you richer. Isn't that funny? First off, let's look at the daily commute for someone who's 20 years old. I'm not sure about your public transport situation, but at least where I live, public transport is absolute trash. I personally have never relied on it because I spent all my hours or all my time biking everywhere, like riding my bike and pedaling, and eventually to the point where I could save up to buy a piece of shit, or AKA my first car, which was a Mazda 3, '07. But that was a decade ago. To even save up money to buy a piece of shit is really difficult these days. If you're in your 20s right now and you have a job, well, first of all, congratulations, because it's actually nearly impossible to get a job right now. But most people that I know who have a job are actually taking the bus or taking public transport. If their job is about half an hour away, maybe even 15 to 30 minutes away, it's about a 1.5 to 2 hour bus ride. Sure, maybe in some cities, public transport is way better. But regardless of the fact, you're spending so much time commuting. If in the morning you spend at least an hour getting there to your work and an hour getting back in the evening, that's 2 hours per day gone. That's 10 hours a week gone that you could be doing something else. A rich person or somebody who even has a decent enough car to drive that doesn't break down all the time can spend that time going to the gym, for example, or cooking, meal prepping for themselves. So the first thing is Gen Z loses out on is the time, which gets spent on commute. You need time to do anything, and it gets eaten up by just traveling. I remember having a conversation with a person not too long ago. They were working in a fast food restaurant, and they would wake up at 5 in the morning to get there by 7, to work a full 8-hour shift and then spend another 2 hours to get home in the evening. That was what their Sunday looked like. And I asked them this one question: is it worth spending an entire day, because you pretty much spent your entire day already, to make $80 fucking dollars? $80. No, that person is not getting paid $10 an hour. They're getting paid minimum wage, which of course you have to deduct tax from, and then you spend money on your bus transfers. That's not free either. So you're basically left making $10 an hour. Is your time actually worth $10 an hour in a society where $10 is not worth anything? So anyway, 3 weeks later, they quit their extra part-time job on the weekend. But not everyone can do that. Sometimes you need that extra $100 to your paycheck because you need to pay for things. So that's your time investment. Now let's look at the actual money investment to just travel. So let's say, okay, you spend money on bus passes, which can actually amount to like $1,000 a year. I don't really know how much they go for these days, but I do remember hearing numbers like $120, $150 a month. So let's just go a step further. You have bought a car, something that gets you from point A to B, but it breaks down all the time. Every month you have to repair something or fix it, or you're gonna die. Basically, it can be unsafe to drive, or you just can't drive. Whatever the issue is. I remember having a car like that, and I had to constantly spend money fixing it all the time. And then, of course, you have gas, insurance, payments, whatever. All that goes on top of it. So is it really better? Sometimes it's more worth it to get a newer car that maybe you're gonna lease, and it's just not gonna break down for the first few years. And that ends up being the same amount of money. But the point is that when you don't have large sums of money that are saved up to put up front for something, you end up buying the cheaper option, and the cheaper option often costs a lot more to replace or to maintain. That's why being poor is so damn expensive. I used to work with a person who constantly had to buy food outside, essentially eat fast food, not because it was cheap, but because it was faster and they basically had no other option, and it ended up more expensive for them. And this was happening on a daily basis. And I asked them, well, I bring meals to work. I make my meals. I always take something with me. Why don't you do that? And they said, when? Let's think about it. I get up in the morning. I have to get ready and go to work. I get to work by 9. I leave work at 9. So essentially spend all day there, 12 hours. I get home and I go to sleep. I don't have time to cook or go shopping or do any of those things. And so I end up buying food out whenever it's lunchtime or whenever there's a break, which ultimately just costs more. And you might think, well, maybe what about the weekend? Well, that guy was also working on the weekends. So he really had no time to make food or buy food. So in the long run, that ends up costing a lot more because fast food is not that cheap either. And it's a lot cheaper to, let's say, buy a bag of rice, buy some chicken, and cook that shit. Now, because we're on the topic of food, although those shittier food options is going to cost more in the end or in the long term, we also need to take into consideration the effect it has on your health. And those of you that are into fitness know this, but if you eat shit food, you're gonna feel like shit. Your mind is gonna be foggy, you won't be able to think clearly, your body's gonna become sloppy, you're gonna worsen your metabolism, and then do you think you're gonna be in a mental state of making some important life decisions? No, you're just gonna roll with it. You're gonna try to keep on surviving by eating the next meal and still feeling worse about it. And I'm not talking feeling bad because you spent money and you ate out when you didn't mean to. I'm saying feeling bad because the food you're putting in your body actually has a negative effect on your body. So we also end up having to pay with our health. Now, here is one of my favorite ones, which I personally have experienced a lot. And that is banks and banking fees and credit cards and anything to do with actual money management. If you got to work a nice stable job and you don't have a lot of bills to pay and you just pay your shit every single month, that's a miracle these days. But if you're following so far and connecting the dots, the fact that you are probably not going to have enough money to pay certain bills, and this was true for me when I was starting out a business. As you guys know, starting business, starting anything new, you're going to take risk. Whether you're going to lose a lot of money, you're going to make money. Some months you don't make any money, you actually go negative. So what do you do during those months? Of course, sometimes you prepare for it. You have savings. Maybe during the good months, you put away some money to last you through the bad months. But that's not always possible. Sometimes you still have to eat shit. And that's when I actually learned how the banks and all these lenders and everything absolutely prey on people, especially on poor people. They don't prey on the rich guys. They don't prey on the people that have money. They just lend them money, whatever, here you go. Now, I want you to imagine this situation, and this happens way too commonly these days, and this happened to me so many times. You had a bad month in business. Maybe you don't even do business. Maybe your bills are just so high now and your regular stable income can't keep up with it. So now you have a car payment coming up. Maybe it's your insurance, maybe it's your phone payments, it doesn't matter. Your balance drops into overdraft. So some bank accounts allow overdraft, which is like $100 for most people. Now, depending on your banks, every time your balance is in overdraft, you get charged more. You get charged a certain fee. Some banks do it where it's per day that your balance remains in overdraft. You get some sort of bleed, essentially like $5 or $10 a day. Or maybe it's every purchase or every transaction that you are in overdraft is going to charge you an extra set amount of fees. But the point is, they pretend that, hey, there you go, we're actually going to give you a backup in case you don't have money one month that you can rely on because you've been such a loyal customer. But little do you know, or you probably don't read all that small writing in the contract where it tells you that if you actually do use it, you're getting fucked. And you're never getting out of there. So now for that month, you've used your overdraft, you got charged a lot more. So basically you didn't have enough money to pay, you relied on your bank to pay for some stuff up front, which then you're gonna get paid and you're gonna cover that. But no, you're going to get screwed over in the process. You're going to get charged way more fees. Everything's going to be more expensive. You already don't have money, but now you have to pay more. Funny, right? But of course, $100 isn't that much as an overdraft. What about when you have certain payment like rent coming out or whatever it is? Let's say it's $500 and your bank goes into negative beyond the overdraft. Fees in that are insane. I remember at one point I had automatic payments for my phone bills, and that shit was like $40. It just so happens I went through a lot of consecutive bad months in the business, and it was hard to come up with the money for it. Not that specific payment, but in general. So my balance was in the overdraft. It was like, I don't know, minus 80 or something. And here comes the automatic payment of another minus 40, throwing you beyond the overdraft. Guess what happens? Not only does that payment that goes into below the overdraft triggers a fee of like $45 or $50 as some kind of penalty fee. So great, now I've just doubled my phone bill, but the phone bill itself bounces back after a couple days, meaning it actually didn't go through anyway. So now you've effectively, or in that moment, I've effectively doubled my phone bill for absolutely no reason. And of course, that's not even the end of it, because the phone company is gonna now charge you late fees. And if you don't cover a certain amount after a few months, they're also gonna charge you suspension fees or whatever bullshit they do. So basically what I'm saying is, when you are down, whether you're building a business to better yourself or you're simply struggling, like most people are, the fees will always be there to fuck you in the ass every single time. I remember experiencing that for the first time, and I thought, hold on, let me get this straight. So because I don't have money at the moment, you're gonna charge me more of what I don't have? How does that make any sense? And the interesting part is banks make a shitload of money on that. All right, I pulled up the numbers right here. In the States in 2024, the total that banks made from people who ran out of money is $12.1 billion. Think about that. $12 billion were made on people who did not have money. One thing I also forgot to mention is credit card fees. 22%, 23% and higher, right? Those that have used credit cards know how absolutely insane it is. It's like they're supposed to back you up, but all they do is make you poorer and make it impossible to pay them off. For those that are also interested, how much do banks make from credit card interest? It's about $250 billion a year. That's $250 billion made from interest on credit cards. So pretty much the poorer generation, or the generation that has to work harder for still nothing, spends more time commuting, eats worse food, spends more money on food, and pays more fees for banks than anybody else. It's funny they call Gen Z the lazy generation, but it's not that we're necessarily lazy. It's that we are funding your lifestyle. This goes back to my previous statement. Just like cows are raised to get milk and meat farmed out of them, that's their only purpose of existence. That's what a lot of us Gen Z are raised to extract energy and time from us. Because you get locked into a system where it's basically impossible to escape. Because while you're busy surviving, you have absolutely no time to think, how do you get out of this situation? And the small fraction, the tiny percentage of those of you that actually have the time to think about what's going on and are trying to make steps forward to get out of the shithole, then keep it up, keep trying, because there is no sense to be stuck on the ground level. It is absolutely a miserable existence. And I wish more people could open up their minds and see either these kind of videos that share this information, or just in general open up their eyes and see what's happening in the world without being stuck in this endless cycle of work, sleep, work, sleep. Anyway, something to think about. Feel free to follow if you relate to my videos. Other than that, I'll catch you guys in the next one.